From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan. If you've got a tip on anything you find interesting, an unsolved murder, a real-life mystery, new leads on who wrote the Book of Love, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's area code 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now, here's your host, searching Netflix for old episodes of Quincy M.E., Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Oh, producer Mark, it is always kind of amazing to me how you know me inside and out, upside and down. I was always a huge fan of Quincy M.E. I became a stringer on a local newspaper in northern Kentucky as a youth so that I could have an excuse to interview Dr. Robert Reich, who was the coroner for Kenton County.
No kidding.
No kidding. And I went to him with my, hey, what's it like seeing dead people and some shit?
I just remember the theme song.
Okay, you know what? Just you pipe down in there, sunshine.
All right.
You've gone too far. No, I did not remember the theme song, but the moment you started it, it brought back a visceral, memory, and my butt slammed shut. So
okay, well, I don't want that.
Yeah, I think you do.
We must move on.
So, but stop. So I need to finish my sentence before you went into your musical interlude. Dr. Robert Reich said, well, it's not like an episode of Quincy. I mean, I can't solve a case in an hour. And I was like, oh, shit.
I must have disappointed you.
Yeah, I was a little sad. But
yeah, you've gotten over it.
That was the shine of youth. I thought you could possibly solve the case in an hour. Silly me. So speaking of corners and such, this case is fascinating on every level in my life, and it was brought back up in full Technicolor this week when the friend of a friend went quote unquote missing on a road trip from his home in the southern part of the Midwest to California, and he showed back up 11 days later and at his home, having a series of miscommunications or missteps. I really don't exactly know. I wish I could solve this one in an hour, but I can't. So what brought it up was discussing over and over again with the marvelous Carrie Hewitt, who is brilliant, and brought some points up to me like, well, perhaps he's here or maybe here. And I thought, oh, you know what? That I actually know someone that happened to. So what she was mentioning was the California aqueduct, which I guess is responsible for a couple of people being found in it. I don't know. The only one I'm familiar with is because it's just a little bit of a personal attachment. In the year of our Lord, 1997, I had just begun working at Lumiere Films, a fantastic French movie production company that is responsible for things like Leaving Las Vegas, Fresh, Touch, some really beautiful small films that made a huge impact. And Gary DeVore was a screenwriter who had a meeting set up with Lumiere Films. And he never made his meeting. And he basically disappeared. For a little over a year, Gary DeVore had disappeared, much like the friend of a friend. But he was only gone for 11 days. And Gary DeVore was married, happily married, and his career was on the upswing. So it wasn't that he was suicidal. I remember at the time, and I'd never gotten to meet Mr. DeVore, but the president, owner of the company, Leila Kazez, God rest her soul, just passed away a few months ago at her home in Argentina. She said, "Oh, he he was probably killed by the government. And I was like, and she didn't talk like Zsa Zsa Gabor. She was Italian who grew up in Argentina but moved to France. So she had a myriad of European accents. But she was convinced something bad happened to him because he disappeared. And I thought, that's funny. Okay. So going back a little bit, Gary DeVore is a pretty cool dude. He was born in 1941, and he was a truck driver for a long time. And that plays into what happened to him when he disappeared. Those details will come out. But he started his screenwriting career. He's one of those rare individuals that has like a blue-collar job, but can transition into what he wanted to do, which was be a screenwriter. So he started the way a lot of people do in comedy and game shows, reality shows. So he started in the 60s on the Newlywed Game and the Steve Allen Show, and he sort of morphed his way into films. And I think some of that had to do with, he was kind of a dashing figure himself. He was, tallish, handsome, very handsome. I think he might have been a bit of a coxman because he had like 4 wives and a bunch of girlfriends, and not like, oh, look at Sue Ellen down at the general store. No. His first marriage was to Nat King Cole's widow, Maria Cole. They were married for 11 years, and then he married a series of actresses. But in the meantime, he also dated Janet Jackson. What?
Wow,
so,
that's crossing the generational line.
He's a really interesting fella. And his friends, what do you hear about his friends and companions? There's enough intrigue in his story that I might actually start wearing a tinfoil hat. I mean, it's kind of a bizarre, layered like baklava kind of conspiracy, and it's pretty rich, like baklava also. Perhaps I'm just hungry. I'm not sure why. Anyway, so he was married to Sandy Newton, Claudia Christensen, and then finally the last actress, Wendy Oates. And they were together 5 years, but they were only married about a year and a half before he went missing. So he was very good friends with the actress Marsha Mason, and they were collaborating on a script called The Big Steal, which ironically is the story of a man who orchestrates his own disappearance. So it was going to be his directorial debut, and he was getting some help from Marsha Mason. Perhaps she was going to be in the film. I know they were good friends, but he was leaving her home in Santa Fe and heading back to his home in Santa Barbara to his wife. That's through the Mojave Desert, apparently. I'm not good with directions. Is that what you would say, producer Mark?
Yes, it's through the, yes. And
Okay.
there's a number of ways to take it. Apparently he was taking some back roads.
I think so. And that I think may have been part of the weirdness. So he never makes it home that night. He speaks to his wife a few times, and it's odd. I mean, this is 1997, and cell phones, were a bit more prevalent. I don't think I got my first one until 1996, and it was an old used like Army field phone. It was a brick phone that weighed 7 pounds. I'm fairly sure it's the cause of my shoulder pain now in my dotage. But when I was younger, I had to buy a new purse, a larger purse, to carry my giant 7-pound brick Army field phone with a huge black rubber antenna. And I had 20 minutes a month. 20 minutes a month of cell time for probably a huge amount of money, because I was a big baller. I was rolling like a baller. Anyway, so he is driving through the Mojave Desert at night and headed home to his wife of just a little over a year. I think she probably regrets this part. He called her around 12:40 a.m. and she said, I'm watching a show on HBO and it ends at 1. Can I call you back? And he's like, okay, sure. So she calls him back at 1, and she calls him 3 times, and he doesn't answer. And at 1:15, he calls her back, and the phone call is awkward and uncomfortable, and Wendy DeVore has never quite understood or gotten over it. She said, so where are you? And he said, I'm past Barstow. And she said, so you'll be home in 3 or 4 hours? And he said, yeah, about that. And a few other questions were asked, and they were not answered really to her liking. And then he said, talk to you later, and hung up. So she's, I don't think she's crazy. She has some conspiracy theories about what happened, and she has done a whole lot of research on her own. There are other people who have a lot more conspiracy theories about what happened, and it's pretty fascinating, including a book or two and a documentary, which I will be talking about in a minute. So he is never heard from again. Wendy DeVore goes outside about 4:30 a.m. and opens up the gate so he can drive right in, but he never drives back in. And it was a crazy mystery as to where he went, because apparently the place he was actually found about a year and a week after he disappeared. He disappeared at the end of June in 1997, and he was found around the first week of July of 1998 in a place that had been supposedly searched a zillion times, part of the California aqueduct. He was in the water under a bridge. There were no signs of a car going, and it was a big car. It wasn't a little car. It was a big Ford Explorer, one of the Eddie Bauer ones, big XL. It was pretty big. I remember the Eddie Bauer Ford Explorers because I loved them so much. I didn't particularly care about Eddie Bauer, but it was a big honking machine, and it had beautiful leather interior. It was like a fancy SUV. And in 1997, that was a little bit rare. They're a little fancier now, but it was a big machine, and it would be a little bit hard to hide, in my opinion. So he talks to his wife the last time at 1:15. It's never heard from again. She puts out a $100,000 reward. He has some interesting defects. His right little finger had been broken, and it jutted out to the side. And there are numerous pictures of him standing there, like on the red carpet with his wife, with his little finger sticking out, on the set of a film with Kurt Russell, his finger sticking out, on the set of a film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, his crazy little finger sticking out. He wrote a lot of, he was a script doctor, and he wrote a lot of interesting, not my type of movies, more dude movies, but Raw Deal with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dogs of War with Christopher Walken. And then he had kind of, fallen off the face of the earth a little bit, no pun intended, but he was back. He was on the upswing. So it was sort of clear he had no reason to kill himself. He was in a beautiful, happy marriage. His career is on the upswing. And there's just no reason for him to have killed himself. He wasn't depressed. I mean, the press dug into his disappearance quite frankly, like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, Wendy, the widow, was on Greta Van Sustren's show on CNN, and she was quizzed about, was he depressed about his $2.5 million tax issue? And she was like, well, no, that was years ago, and he paid that off. Why are you talking about that now? So it's interesting. Lisa Gibbons had a psychic on, and Wendy was on the show, and poor Wendy had to sit there while the psychic told her that her husband was working at a Kmart in Alabama.
You're kidding.
I am not. Because, that's what you do. You start your life as a truck driver, you work your ass off, you fight your way into Hollywood, you become successful, you get a little older, they ignore you, you come up with some great ideas, you come back, and then you're like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to drive off the California aqueduct, and I'm going to go work at a Kmart in Alabama.
Yeah.
I wonder if I still have Janet Jackson's phone number on my phone. Hold on. This number has been disconnected. So there is a British academic researcher who is an expert in the links between Hollywood and politics. Dun, 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 dun. And his name is Dr. Matthew Alford. And he has written a book and has produced a documentary about Gary DeVore's disappearance and eventual finding, and it's called The Writer with No Hands. And do you know why it's called that, Mark?
I can't wait.
Do you think it's because he doesn't have hands?
I'm going to guess.
Right.
The interesting part will be why.
Yes, sir. That is the interesting part. So everyone's looking for him. No one's finding him. He's, working in a Kmart in Alabama, blah, blah, blah. And a part-time amateur detective who has, everyone in this story has really fascinating pedigree. This private detective was a bodyguard for Judy Garland and Frank Sinatra. His name is Donald Crutchfield. He then, became a private investigator, and he had a hunch. He's like, he drove up and down the 14 freeway in Palmdale and was like, I have an idea of where he could be. And it's a year and a week later, and he finds a piece of metal on the side of the road that looks suspiciously like it could have been from an Eddie Bauer Ford Explorer XL. And he calls the police, and they come and check it out. And they look under the bridge where it crosses the aqueduct. And I'll be darned, there's an Eddie Bauer Ford Explorer XL with a guy in it.
Okay, he just cruised the 14 until he found this.
And the guy, after an autopsy, is determined to be Gary DeVore. But the things missing are as interesting as the things found. So he is strapped into his driver's seat, window down, the way he always liked to drive, according to Wendy. His Toshiba laptop with the script on it is missing. His gun and ammunition, which were always under the driver's seat, also missing. And also missing are his hands. His hands are gone, which would have been fascinating because he had that very strange anomaly with the little finger that literally jutted out to the right, like a left-hand turn or right-hand turn. And they look and look and look, and the official report said that there were 23 hand bones that were found. And Dr. Alford finds out that there's actually 3 of them. None of them are the deformed right hand little finger, which you would have obviously figured out it was him. And after he is given access to the bones, they're not Gary's bones. They're 200-year-old finger bones.
That's an amazing coincidence.
You find that a coincidence, you say?
Continue.
Okay. I don't really find that a coinky-dink. I find that fucking weird planted shit. I'm adjusting my tinfoil hat. I am putting it toward the correct microwaves. So the laptop with the script is gone. His gun is gone. A few other things are odd. According to Wendy, the widow, he never wore a seatbelt. Now, I'm faulting him for that because, that's crazy. However, this part I know to be true because producer Mark schooled me. As a chick, you got a purse and you typically throw it in the passenger seat if you're driving alone. You might throw it in the back seat if you got a passenger. As a dude, I have been with Mark driving numerous times when he's like, oh, this is killing my butt. So I believe it actually caused him some back pain and definitely some butt pain, but he's learned to not drive with his wallet in his back pocket. Is that correct, producer Mark?
Yes. Plus, I'm particularly bad because I have the famous George Costanza wallet, the one that's got a million things in it, and it's all bundled in there. But yes,
just one reason why I love you, because you carry everything like a chick in a wallet. You make it work, and I love that. So Gary DeVore was a long-haul truck driver, and he would never have had his wallet in his back pocket. So when they find him, he's strapped in, sitting up in his car, wallet in his back pocket, wouldn't have been a possibility. Seatbelt on, also kind of weird. And Dr. Alford found out that even though the aqueduct had been searched extensively, there were no signs of an impact in the water, the silt, nothing had been disturbed. And for the official account of his disappearance to really work, he would have had to have driven 3 miles against traffic on the wrong side of the road with his lights off. So he was found with the lights off, which, maybe during the impact he hit a button and the lights were off. But it's kind of weird that he would have... The theory is he stopped for a break, got back on the freeway going the wrong way with his lights off for 3 miles. Now, granted, it's 1 a.m, maybe not a lot of traffic. I don't know. Seems like an area that you might run into some desert rats at night. And if you don't have your lights on, you're going the wrong way. I don't know. It just seemed, try not to buy in, but I guess I kind of am buying in. So for this documentary, The Rider with No Hands, they recreated his trip. And the private investigator said, look, Evel Knievel on his best night couldn't have done this. It was horrific and dark. There are no lights in that area to light the road. Pretty weird, pretty strange. But, strange things happen. There are things we can't explain. They happen. I'm going to go on. So in his last phone call with Wendy, he says something that she thinks is an odd statement. He says, I'm pumping pure adrenaline here. Now, she said even though he was a writer and words were very important to him, he wouldn't answer her, like, how you doing? How you feeling? That didn't seem like a sentence he would string together, and she didn't understand why. He was calm and happy and leaving Marcia Mason's house, happy with the script. And I thought, I'm pumping pure adrenaline here. Maybe he was excited about the script. I didn't know him. And she just was like, well, that was odd. Very strange kind of conversation. So when they finally drag his car, his SUV, out of the aqueduct, many witnesses who are like, hey, what's happening here, have reported that there were unmarked black helicopters taking pictures of the vehicle. Again, I've a little tinfoil hatty, but it could happen. And during the documentary, Dr. Alford says that he confirmed there was neither a police helicopter or a helicopter gone rogue from the nearby Air Force Base. So there's no explanation really for that. So Dr. Alford takes all of his findings to the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department and then requested their file on Gary DeVore's disappearance, which is now 600 pages long and marked confidential. And the Sheriff's Department says, there's new information. This is 20 years later. There's new information, and they might need to reopen a criminal investigation, so they can't release the file. So Alfred is like, at best, there's a lot of blatant errors here, especially regarding the hand bones. But at worst, the police pretended to take it extremely seriously and didn't take it seriously at all. And Dr. Alford said the police should have long ago reinvestigated and reevaluated what went wrong with the entire handling of this case. So Gary DeVore's previous ex-wife, Claudia Christian, an actress, and Wendy DeVore both said that they had gotten phone calls when they were with Gary from people, saying that they were with different government services. And they both remember him working on documents with Cyrillic writing and he wouldn't explain why. So Cyrillic writing is typically left to right, left to right, and it's named after Saint Cyril, and it's more like a Russian writing. It's a little bit symbol, a little bit alphabet, but it would be difficult for someone who doesn't know it to read. So Wendy is the first person who revealed the details of the script, even though she couldn't read it because he was writing it in a secret handwriting. And she said, she revealed this to CNN. She said he was really disturbed over some of the things that he had been finding in his research. He was researching the United States invasion of Panama, and he was setting the actual story that he was writing against this research and the overthrow of Manuel Noriega and the enormous amounts of money laundering in Panamanian banks, and of course our own government's money laundering. Dun, 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 dun.
Aha. So this is the script that was on the Toshiba laptop?
Well, there's some confusion. So the script is called The Big Steal and is a remake of a 1949 film about a man who orchestrates his own disappearance in Panama. I believe him researching that to remake the film with Marsha Mason is what led him to want to write a different script about. So in 1989, it actually comes out that Manuel Noriega had something called a honey trap, where he apparently, they tried very hard to hide this, but apparently many CIA senior officials were plied with drugs and honeys, and he videotaped a lot of it. So his script is saying that the U.S. government orchestrated the overthrow of the Panamanian government to get a hold of these tapes and information on high-level corruption and malfeasance.
So it wasn't really to get rid of Noriega as a big drug pin or anything like that.
Right. Yes. So the more that Dr. Alfred digs, he finds that little pieces of information that kind of give you pause, you know. Gary DeVore worked at the Tonopah Air Force Base, which is called Area 52. He traveled to South America quite often with the military, including Panama, and told his wife Wendy he was going on location scout searches, and she found out that a lot of the time that wasn't true. He was accompanying government officials to Panama. So here's where it gets even more bizarre and layered. Gary DeVore was Tommy Lee Jones' best man, and Tommy Lee Jones' cousin is Chase Brandon, and he became the face of the CIA's Hollywood office in the 1980s. They were trying to combine the government and filmmaking to make sure that the official word is that to make sure that films involving the military were done correctly. It's very, very layered. It's very layered.
I've got a headache.
Me too, brother. I feel like Tommy Lee Jones is probably either God or the devil, or both. I think he's in charge of everything, but that's just my opinion. So Wendy DeVore found some earlier drafts of the script, and there are amazing lines in the script that sort of are full of skepticism for our government. It has lines like, "It sounds like the Pentagon planned a bank robbery and a war is just a diversion. And do you think we'd really invade Panama just to grab Noriega?" So these are lines that were also confirmed by a British director named John Irvin. And he said, Gary may have found a particular tape. And the particular tape was going to reveal secrets in the third act, which we will never know because it's all gone. Dun, 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 dun. So obviously Dr. Alfred is saying that the movie that Gary DeVore was going to make his directorial debut with was probably going to present the invasion of Panama as really nothing than a diversion that would allow the U.S. into Panama to steal back incriminating photos and information on U.S. officials that Noriega could have used for blackmail. I just think the lines like, all this just to pick up Noriega? It sounds like the Pentagon planned a bank robbery and the war is just a diversion. I'm not sure who's saying that. Maybe it's Tommy Lee. Maybe it was a Tommy Lee Jones role.
Could have been.
I am wondering.
One of the lines didn't happen to be, I'm pumping pure adrenaline here, was it?
Oh, shit. Oh, damn it. Now you've completely solved the case. And obviously the government killed Gary DeVore and took his hands.
Yeah. Yeah. So the answer is no, it's not in the script.
It's not as far as I know.
Okay.
We don't know. The script is gone, babe. I mean, producer Mark. We have no script, so we don't know. So Wendy DeVore says that when we first got married, he told me he gets a lot of calls from government agencies. And he told me to ignore it, so I did. If the phone rang, he said I could take a message or say he was out, but I really couldn't speak to them. And we just had a few at first. And then the last month before he passed away, or before he disappeared, one man called all the time. All the time. And she's like, things just don't add up. I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but when you're married to someone and you know little things about them that seem insignificant, but are actually crucial, I just think these things don't add up. Okay, so.
Doesn't add up to me. It's kind of. I think I'm putting together my own tinfoil hat now.
Yeah, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist. I'm really not. However, this has so much involved in it, and I just think it's hilarious that Leela Kazez, offhandedly said, "Oh, the government killed him," and I thought it was hilariously funny at the time. She also wondered why she didn't get her screener copy of The Bride of Chucky.
Which would probably lead you maybe not to take her all that seriously.
Right? Because I was like, Leela, you're a producer and you're voting on producers' films that are being nominated. Do you know what Bride of Chucky is? And she's like, no. I had to explain to her it was an evil doll and he had a wife and it probably wasn't going to be nominated. So that's why she didn't get that screener. She was very upset that she didn't get the screener for Bride of Chucky. So yeah, I didn't take her offhanded sentence, the government killed him. Yeah, okay. So within a week after he has disappeared, Wendy DeVore gets a visit at her home from the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and the DOD. All of them come to her home. She doesn't know which agency is responsible for this, but when one of the officials went into Gary's home office, his computer was completely wiped of all information. Everything gone.
So one of those visitors did that.
One of those visitors is not like the others, or is exactly like the others. I don't know. But the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the DOD. And the DOD actually said to her, let this go.
So this really isn't like tinfoil hat stuff. This is real stuff.
Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, if all of this is, she's not making this up. She was visited by all these representatives from all these different agencies in the same week.
Mm-hmm. Right after he disappeared.
Well, so, okay. Yeah. It's not tinfoil hat stuff.
Okay. I don't know.
Something was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's got to be true. And it could just be because, they were curious as to what the project was. I don't know. I'm not, saying none of this happened. I know there are many journalists who found out more information than Wendy had and said, he was really, really tied to the military. And she's like, no, I really didn't know that. I had no idea. So it's kind of fascinating to me, all of this together. All of these crazy details, and some of them probably can be explained away. Maybe they can't. I don't really know. The Don Crutchfield, the investigator who had a hunch that he may be in the aqueduct and found him a year later, says he thinks the script is of paramount importance, which we're not ever going to see that. But he said, if I had that script in my hand, I could tell you what happened to Gary DeVore. Yes, you probably could, and you're not going to get it unless you can break into the CIA or whoever stole. Oops, sorry, I don't know who stole it. Anyway, however, his maybe just keep combing the aqueduct, and maybe that Toshiba laptop will float up somewhere with some hands attached to it that got all cut off.
See, the hands part is the weird part, because if it was if he was offed by the government, okay,
yes,
which is what we're suggesting here. Let's not beat around the bush,
right?
That doesn't sound like something that the government would do. They would just off the guy and belt him into the car and take away his all of that. But the hands, that sounds something like organized crime would do. That sounds like a message of some sort.
Well, there were also theories that a Russian gang, the Russian mob involved in drugs offed him, but there was really no connection. His only connection was really toward doing this film, and his connection with accompanying governmental officials to Panama, etc. It's there are definitely other theories. He could also be working at a Kmart in Alabama, but he's not, because they actually managed to do a dental DNA, because the teeth weren't 200 years old, just the hands were. That's an odd. I'm not a forensic pathologist, so I don't know. Do hands become unattached and float up?
That's the other thing, is that the hands that they did find bones of hands, but only a few.
3.
And only a few, but they
Phalanges.
were 200.
Yeah.
They were 200 years old.
200-year-old phalanges.
So why plant those if they were planted, or is it just coincidence that there was?
I don't know, but the government can't give any explanation as to why the hands. There's no explanation to why the hands aren't there. There's no explanation as to why it doesn't look like he had a true accident. I'm not saying it looks like he was pushed in there, but there was no, disturbance of the ground around him. Like if you were driving into an aqueduct, you might hit the brakes or something. So, there's lots of things we're not going to be able to figure out 20 years later. And it's going to be a case where we may not know what happened. And we're just going to have to say, poor Gary DeVore drove home at night in the dark, and this just sucks giant donkey cock.
I think this is a perfect case for our listeners to start looking into, and if they learn something, maybe they can call the Tip-Ster hotline and see if they maybe give us some hints, some clues, some ideas.
Well, I would love that. If anyone has an idea, theory, you could email us at jttipsters@gmail.com or call us at 832-Tipsters. But I think the final quote from Wendy DeVore says more than anything else and may explain more than we'll ever know. She says, I do not know what happened to him, but I know one thing. Finding him was the worst thing that I could ever try to go through because of all the problems. I believe the sheriff's department that I reported it to did look for him. I believe they were obligated by law not to go into other jurisdictions, including the road that he was found on. They had to depend on other sheriff's departments to continue their search, and I do think there's a bit of territoriality among the various departments. And that, Wendy DeVore, could not be more true. And I am very sorry for you and your family and Gary's friends and loved ones who don't have him anymore. and it is my biggest pet peeve that law enforcement agencies don't communicate, whether it's from egos or protection of their own careers. I don't know. But I know that if law enforcement would open up their files to each other and just fucking talk, we would probably solve a lot of things. Mysterious disappearances, murders, suicides. We'd probably all sleep a lot easier if we knew that our law enforcement could communicate correctly. So that is the sort of unsolved yet supposedly solved story of Gary DeVore. And I would love to see the big steal. And I would love to see his hands and his bent pinky. And more cowbell.
And that number again is 832-TIPSTER, area code 832-847-7837, or email us at jttipsters@gmail.com.